We hope to clear up some misconceptions about commercial real estate and about what you're hearing on the news today, and just talk about what the path forward is. Give us an update on the commercial real estate market. Hey everybody, it's my pleasure to welcome a good friend of mine, Josh Simon. He is a commercial real estate brokerage owner and developer, and just a tremendous success story. I met him several years ago when I lived in Arizona, and he has just done amazing things. And I asked him to come on with us today and understand, of course, when people talk about commercial real estate, what are they talking about? Retail, office, industrial, self-storage. So commercial real estate is a bit of a misnomer, and then there are many types within that. Just want to say that this is a general discussion of some rather complex topics. So of course, if anything is discussed that might require tax or legal advice or other professional advice, get that from the appropriate professional. Nothing is meant to be specific for your situation specifically. Also, be sure to check out our privacy policy and terms of service at jasonhartman.com. And now, let's bring Josh on. Josh, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey,
how you doing?
Hey, welcome. Good. It's good to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're probably sitting in an empty office, I'm guessing.
Yes, partially empty, but we're in Arizona, so we're slowly opening back up.
Good to hear. Well, hey, what's going on in the commercial real estate market, just kind of broadly? We're all hearing tales of distress and disaster. Give us a little background and tell us who you are and what you do so people understand better.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me. So we're a commercial real estate development company based here in Scottsdale. As you can see from the slide, we've developed 184 projects in 22 states. We've done this mostly single tenant net lease retail. So think Starbucks, Dollar General, Tractor Supply, O'Reilly, Verizon, as well as small multi-tenant retail buildings, that might have a nail salon, a haircut place, as well as some medical office buildings in the past, and then also redeveloping former grocery stores, old Walmart. So we've kind of run the spectrum on the retail side, and so we like to consider ourselves a pretty good expert in the retail space. I think one big thing, the news paints is this major disaster in retail. And, I think you kind of have to break that up into a couple categories here. You have, I think, the most pain being felt in the mall space. And what this is, with JCPenney filing for bankruptcy and some of these Nordstrom's closing, 16 full-line department stores, this is going to force a mall shakeout that was going to be happening nonetheless over the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to speed that up. The next level you have is what we call power centers. So think of power centers as multiple box users. So a Target and a Ross and an Office Max and a TJ Maxx and a shoe store. Those centers have been hurt pretty badly too, because they were not considered mostly essential retail. And so I think that's going to continue to have a lot of pain. Where there's a ton of opportunity, and I would say some of the brighter spots in retail have been the single tenant net lease side of the business, depending on the type of tenant. Grocery anchored, which obviously grocery stores considered an essential service, and so those shopping centers and some of the tenants have remained open through this period.
Yeah, absolutely. So for an investor, the triple net lease type properties, are those the safer bet in the retail space now?
Yeah, and you've seen demand go up, and I think what on the single tenant, what type of tenant it is, and before towards the end of, for the last few years, right before COVID, it was experiential is what everyone wanted, and now it's essential.
Right.
And so essential is, O'Reilly Auto Parts, for example, and your other auto parts stores were considered essential because you got to keep the wheels turning.
Right.
Your auto repair, your dollar stores, because they sell essential services, and obviously grocery stores. And so we've seen demand pick up for essential type retail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And people have been stocking up. One part of that equation does surprise me a little bit. Has Amazon and the other internet e-tailers, have they not been able to capture much of the auto parts market? I see online, I see them trying, but auto parts stores, people aren't just buying all that stuff online. I know some of it's a little large for shipping and so forth, tires, obviously, mufflers, I guess. But to maybe address just the auto parts part specifically.
Yeah, and so interesting thing about a lot of the auto parts, like O'Reilly and their competitors, for example, they do have a lot of consumer B2C, but actually they have a huge B2B business. And so what they act as is like a kind of a supply mechanism for the repair shops down the street in their areas.
Okay.
And so the do-it-yourself component of fixing a car, I don't know about you, I'm not very mechanic friendly. I could probably get my windshield wipers and some basic stuff, but if you get any more complicated, it's very hard to go online and figure out what part you need. And if you need your car fixed, you need it fixed right away. And so these auto parts stores act as suppliers to, these repair shops that are right by them.
Got it. So they're really distributors. They're really like Amazon warehouses.
To a large extent they can be, and they've competed, and Amazon hasn't been able to compete with them, so far in that domain.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Okay, good. Okay, good stuff. So experiential versus essential, that's a great way to put it. And, I remember when I think it was one of the first major experiential shopping, not malls, it's not indoors, I guess, but outdoor centers that opened. And I lived in Orange County at the time. When Irvine Spectrum opened, and that was a big deal. I mean, everybody around the country was talking about that center. And of course, it had retail, but it also had a lot of entertainment component to it. So talk to us about the experiential thing. Just help us better understand or define that. And like you said, that's what every developer wanted, every investor wanted, but now it's completely shifted because the experiential has shut down, right? And now they want essential. So tell us about this dichotomy, if you would.
Yeah, and so experiential, you could think of the whole shopping center, but I also think of it as, hey, what's something that you can't easily replace online? So experiential could be going to a basketball game. It could be going to the gym, going to a F45 or an Orange Theory class, because that's experiential. And so what's happened is everyone desired to have these tenants in their shopping center. And obviously those were the first tenants, forced to close. You look at movie theaters, that's an experiential tenant. And who knows, what is the short-term future of theaters? What kind of changes will go on? But I also think it's an exciting time to be in retail, because I think there's going to be a lot of good concepts that are made stronger through this process. And I also think it reinforces the idea of having a balanced portfolio investments. I think for us, a key is hey, do we have a drive-through? Is our multi-tenant buildings, are they close to the street where, hey, we're not forced to have to drive traffic back to the theater and we can't be seen from the street? So if you're up on the street, people are still driving by, and even if that theater was closed, you still, are able to get traffic passing your storefront.
Yeah, very interesting. One of the weirdest stores that opened, I remember in the Irvine Spectrum years ago, and I got to tell you this one because this doesn't strike me as experiential very much, but it was back when, and I guess for some reason this faded out, when there were all these commercials on the radio for CT scans, okay, of your body, right? And I remember in Irvine Spectrum, this beautiful sort of high-end CT scanning place opened, and it was like a spa, and I thought, oh, let me think, does someone go out to dinner and, hey, let's go get a CT scan before dinner? I mean, that one just struck me.
And after dinner, right?
Yeah.
You get one before.
Yeah, before and after, sure. That just struck me as a very unusual thing. But they have the entertainment for the kids. They'll have a merry-go-round. They'll have a Ferris wheel, like some interesting experiential stuff in there. And yeah, that's just interesting. So talk to us about online sales, if you would.
Yeah, and so what we've seen in talking to our tenants and just being so active in the market is the online trend has definitely grown. And so we've seen people that have never done click and collect, online grocery ordering. They've done it for the first time, and that number is going to speed up. But we've also seen how important brick and mortar is. People still want to go to the grocery store, and you've seen the pickup of tenants that were deemed essential. That has continued to grow. And I think one long-term trend that comes out of this is, if you think of a grocery store and what you call the center store, your paper towels, your cleaning supplies, I think that becomes even smaller in the future, because I think those items, they're a commodity. You can order those online. You can get those from Amazon Pantry or from whoever your grocery store provider is online. And so I think over time the grocery store is going to get smaller because of that center store isn't needed as much.
Center store. What do you mean when you say that?
So if you picture when you go into a grocery store, what's on the right? Mm-hmm. Produce. On the left is your meats, maybe your wine, right, your dairy. Okay. And so what do you have in the middle? It's all the goods that are your paper towels, your toilet paper, your cleaning supplies, your dog food. Okay. The center store is not a very profitable place. Okay. And that's why you've seen Sprouts and Trader Joe's. They've done so well because they're not really that center store. They have they're very focused. They have that niche that they appeal to. They're
really focusing on food items more than supply items, right?
Correct. So you think of Sprouts. If you have Sprouts, by you, they're really good with produce, fresh produce. Yep. They're known for their vitamins. Trader Joe's is not known for their dairy, but they're known for some of their, kind of special packaged goods, right? That you can only get there. And so what you find is people make multiple trips to different, grocery stores to fulfill their needs. I know my fiance, she goes to Safeway, Trader Joe's, and Sprouts all in one, quick trip. So
right, and kind of does them all and gets the different stuff. That's great. Okay, good stuff. Yeah. So the center store is going more online, and the perimeter is more in needing the bricks and mortar. Right? Is that the point?
Exactly. I mean, I don't know a lot of people ordering. If they're steaks, their produce, they want to see it, they want to touch it, They want to walk around the store.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because I buy almost everything online, but the one thing I still do, and people ask me, I still go to the grocery store. I prefer to go and get my food, and I'm mostly a shopper of the perimeter because that's where the healthier stuff is. They say if you want to be healthy, don't shop in the center of the store, because that's all the preservatives, right? The fresh stuff's on the outside. So good stuff. Okay, so drive-through and to-go, and this is, it's amazing, Josh, how well capitalism works and how quickly so many businesses adapted to the change. And, they were, restaurants and all kinds of services that became curbside or delivery, right?
Yeah, and I see this trend continuing. It obviously unfortunately, it's going to hurt smaller business more proportionally that doesn't have an online presence or ordering capabilities. But I think it will force everyone to really clean up their act and get that going much faster than they obviously anticipated. The other thing that's been interesting is how fast, and I give a lot of credit to a lot of states and their governments because they have adapted quickly to allow cocktails to go, for example. Who would have thought you could walk in and buy a Greyhound to go? I
didn't know you could do that, by the way. I might go visit my restaurant here.
Yeah, and even in California, we were in Newport this past weekend, and you were able to get to-go margaritas at a bar and take them home. Huh. So I think...
And just out of curiosity, were those sealed in some way?
Yeah, they have. They put a piece of tape over the straw.
Oh,
You put the straw in, so that way it's sealed.
yeah.
But I think that's a trend that that might stay in some capacity post COVID. And
Right.
so I think having to go and drive, especially a drive-through lane. I think we'll see the evolution of like a pickup lane. I think what hopefully happens with municipalities is, hey, they're more open to the importance of drive-thrus and creating pickup lanes. And hey, when you have, for example, Panera has an app that you can turn on your like location beacon, and when you get into the parking lot, it notifies the staff in the store that, hey, you're here for your food, and they'll bring it out to your car.
Yeah.
And so I think all these things are going to continue to just speed up the progression that was already going to happen.
Right, right. And there are a lot of really good things coming out of this difficult time. A lot of efficiencies that we might not have seen for 5 or 10 years are being, adopted quickly. And it's great. I mean, it's really a great thing. Just efficiencies everywhere with online meetings, etc. And all of the things you just mentioned. And those will stick with us. Telemedicine, my veterinarian and my doctor both have sent me things saying, download this telemedicine app. And it's like, I've been requesting that for years. And they said, no, we don't do telemedicine. Well, now they do finally, So these efficiencies increase the profits of those businesses, and they're greater efficiencies for the consumer, so the consumer can spend more time living their life or working and being productive, one or the other. And so these things are really quite good for the economy. It's creative destruction, and it's just happening a lot faster than it did before. So there's some good stuff here. Okay, rent collection, Josh. We've been reading and hearing a lot about this on the news, in the newspapers. Lots of articles saying rent strikes. Now, on the residential side, which is my domain, and yours is in the commercial side, I gotta say the news media has totally overplayed this, at least with our investors. My own portfolio, everybody's paying rent. Our clients, pretty much everybody. We don't have an actual statistical survey on this, but the anecdotally, the rent collection has been quite good. You never collect 100% of your rent. That's the first thing people need to understand when they look at these stats. There's no month where any big landlord ever gets 100% rent, okay? There's always a collection problem or two in the portfolio. And so these stats, how are they looking in commercial real estate?
Yeah, so this is our stat, and keep in mind these are pre-deferral deals made. So that 85 is probably more like a 92% from April, and that 90 is probably 95% now. And what I mean by deferral is, hey, we worked out some deferred rent for 90 days while the tenant wasn't able to open. And so we found that just communication is just so important, and the landlord-tenant relationship is really important. I think depending on, where we go back to the beginning of our conversation, what type of asset did you own? Malls, I mean, their collection's super low, right? Power centers, probably I've heard between 20 and 40%, and then grocery anchored 60 to 80, and then you get to some of the mostly essential portfolio, and where we are, and you're up in the 80s and 90s. And so we feel really lucky, at what we've always kind of picked as, our investment thesis. And so I think that continues to improve for everybody going forward. The biggest challenge is going to be where do you live? And so, we're back to normal here. We have people coming into our office now, and obviously with social distancing, but Arizona, you can go to the gym, we had dinner out last night. You could pretty much do anything with social distancing right now, whereas when we were in Newport Beach, they were just slowly starting to open up, and most of California still remains shut, or the majority of the populous counties.
Mm-hmm. And are people wearing masks there?
At the airport, people were wearing masks. In the grocery stores, Outside on the street, no. But I was on a flight, a commercial flight, and it was probably 80% full, and everyone had masks on. So, I think people are taking it really seriously, and obviously the media is going to hype up certain examples, like when they send a picture from the Ozarks of everyone partying. There's always going to be that example, but I feel, even with the opening, the restaurateurs and the gym owners here are taking it very seriously.
Okay, that's good. So, what else do you want us to know on this slide? So, 85% rent collected in April from properties of our essential tenants. Okay.
Yeah, so that's from our portfolio.
Right. Okay. And 90% in May. Okay, good stuff. Anything else on this one?
Nope.
Triple net and the sales of those properties.
Yeah, so I think an interesting thing has been they've delayed the 1031 date depending on when you fell into your identification period to July.
Right.
What we've seen is there's been a flight to certain types of assets, drive-thrus, Essential, Dollar General, O'Reilly, different types of auto dollar stores. And so we've seen that there's been a lot of demand. Pricing hasn't changed, but it's remained stable. And so I think product for good quality tenants that have a drive-through that are essential will remain stable, and more investors will continue to desire them. An interesting thing, we'll see what happens as the year develops, is if multifamily rents have kind of flatlined for the time being, do you have a decrease in 1031 transactions, which means there's a decrease in buyers down the road for these types of properties. But the counter argument to that is not a lot of people are starting construction on new things right now. Just given the environment, it's harder to get financing. We've been fortunate, just because of our tenant lineup. We have 7 closings this week, 3 new projects that, 2 are ground up, one's a remodel of an existing building, and then we're selling a handful of assets as well.
Okay. So one thing on balance I think we need to mention for the listeners is that, we'll have a worldwide audience hearing this presentation, 189 countries, and but mostly in the U.S. And you are in an environment, and your properties, I'm guessing, are all in an environment where you've got a low-rise suburban environment, right? So this is obviously going to be very different in a place like San Francisco, New York City, downtown LA, downtown Seattle, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think I think that's also a long-term trend that will continue, is the value of something being located next to a transit center isn't nearly going to be as desirable as something maybe out in the suburbs. And I think that's why places like Phoenix, which has done pretty well through this whole COVID period, I think will continue to see really good growth, because we are spread out. We don't have the mass transit, infections spreading. And so I think long-term trends, for the West Coast overall, California is its own animal.
It's its own set of problems.
Yeah, its own set of problems.
California is the problem child of the country, and New York's the second one, I'd say, or Illinois too. But yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, we've been talking about this mass migration for 2.5 months that we predicted is going to happen, and now the media is finally catching on, from high density environments to low density environments. And I think the highest danger zones that are sort of necessity participation are elevators and mass transit. Those two are probably the most dangerous places, at least in my opinion. Going to a gym is optional, going to a movie theater is optional, that kind of stuff. But elevators, so when you've got buildings that are 3-4 stories and above, people are pretty much in an elevator. And in Phoenix, you don't have that type of thing, so that's good. And in city environments that are very urban, even once you get out of your own house, everything is crowded. The street is crowded, the sidewalk is crowded, the restaurants are crowded, the coffee shops are crowded, and of course there's new laws and regs about that stuff limiting it. But still, whenever I'm in New York City, if I want a cup of coffee, I got to go to a crowded coffee shop. They're all crowded. That's just the way it is. So I don't know how they're going to serve that many people there, because in a normal environment, there's just been a shortage of supply of anything you want, in those environments. So how do you enforce social distancing? I don't know if it's even possible.
It's tough, right? Like 6 feet away. Like, how do you do that even it's just really hard to even do that in an office environment. You're walking down the hall.
Yeah.
And, those coffee shops in New York, I hope they just can reopen, because if you've been shut down now for, what is it, going on 60, 75 days, yeah, and they could still be closed for a couple months more, I find it probably pretty disheartening. You and I can imagine as business owners if we weren't able to transact. It's going to be an interesting case study looking forward, a year on which business is open or who relocates. But, I find that places like Florida, Phoenix, people are going to want to be here.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. There's going to be a mass migration to the suburban markets. I call it the Grapes of Wrath 2020. It's from John Steinbeck's old novel, right? And that's this is a whole new world we're moving into. Very interesting. Okay, talk to us about lending, operations, e-commerce, kind of where all this stuff is going.
Yeah, so for lending, I was almost going to put declining, but it is negatively affected. But I do see some stability in it. If you've got the right type of product and you have existing lending relationships, there's still money out there. The debt is cheap. If you can refinance or do any kind of floating rate, now's the time. I really believe that. And then, from an operations standpoint, it really just depends on really where geographically, where you're located and what kind of type of business do you have. We saw a huge demand and spike in hotel rooms in Phoenix over Memorial Day weekend, and then up in Sedona. There was a big increase in demand. And then obviously we talked about e-commerce. That's going to continue to force brick and mortar retailers to get smarter with their inventory and really migrating their online presence with their store presence. And, I think you look at like Nordstrom's, I think they're the best example of it, where, hey, order online, pick up in store. You can go to the store. If they don't have your shoe size, they'll ship it from their distribution center and you have it the next day.
Yeah, very, very interesting, very interesting. So we didn't mention hotels until just now. When you say big spike, compared to what is the question? There was no demand for hotels the last 75 days or so. So do you have any occupancy numbers or anything like that for?
I don't have occupancy numbers, but I've talked to a couple hotel owners in the Valley, and they were pleased with the progress overall. And so what does actually pleased mean? That's a good question. Yeah. Phoenix, I had several friends from Chicago that moved down here for the last 2 months and stayed in like an extended stay hotel. And I think those have done overall pretty well, the extended stays versus some of your full line hotels.
I agree, because they're inexpensive enough to be affordable, and people wanted to escape those urban environments. And, they probably spent a lot of time looking at neighborhoods when they were there and thought about moving, because now everybody's really realized, we can work remotely. Not that the technology is anything new, but, people just weren't using it enough. Now everybody's using it, Even non-techie people are all on Zoom. They're all on Skype. They're all using all of the online systems now. So that's really great. And see, those efficiencies will stay with us long after this is over. So that's a good thing. All right, snapshot here.
Yeah, I just put that in there. Just, hey, we are still very overall bullish. Obviously, activity's been affected, but we feel like, in the places we develop, the economy will come back, and I think it'll come back pretty quick. We're seeing construction costs. I don't think there's going to be a huge dip in construction costs, but there's definitely going to be some pricing impact, which I think is positive. And look, we're going to do more deals this year from a new development standpoint than we have in the last 10 years that we've been in business in any single year. So we'll do over 40 this year, and at least 65 escrows closed. So extremely busy year, and I don't really see that changing.
That's, you know what? Congratulations. That is great to hear, and that is so different from the picture we're getting on the news media. It really is just very different. But we do need to keep in mind, everybody, that based on your suburban location and also property type, so it's very dependent on a lot of these things. I've got to ask you, before we wrap it up, how about self-storage in this kind of environment? I haven't owned any self-storage yet. I do a mobile home park and apartments. Certainly, I've had a lot of apartments. But what about something like self-storage? This sort of specialized asset class. How's that going to do through all this?
I think it'll do great. I think in some markets it was overbuilt.
Mm-hmm.
Funny you asked that. We actually are doing, we have 3 projects that are RV and boat storage,
Mm-hmm.
which is very popular in a place like Phoenix. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've got one project under construction in Tucson, which is about 1 million person MSA, 2 hours southeast of Phoenix, and we've got 2 more. And what we kind of found out is like, hey, if you have these retail projects like a mall down the road or a bigger shopping center, if you're able to redevelop part of it for an alternative use like storage or RV and boat, I think you can really create a lot of new value. And so we're pretty excited for that and new opportunities that come with it.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Josh, give out your website.
It's SimonCRE.com, Simon Commercial Real Estate.
Okay, excellent. SimonCRE.com. Thank you so much. One final question before you go, and thank you for sharing this great information with us. Let's talk for a moment about reuse. And we didn't talk about office properties. I know that's not really your thing, but I think office properties, that's kind of a big deal in the commercial real estate sector as to what's going to happen with offices now that, Twitter, Facebook has said, folks, go home. You can work at home indefinitely, right? And lots of companies are saying that. I think that's really a good thing. It's going to be good for the environment because there won't be as much smog and pollution or consumption. And I think people will like their lives a lot better. Not completely. You need some human interaction, but most people kind of like working at home, I think, at least nowadays. These office properties and then some retail properties, not the ones that you're engaged in as much. Are we going to have a big change in zoning laws, do you think, in different parts of the country, maybe turning some of these properties into alternate uses? I mean, shopping malls you mentioned. What do we do with, you said that's a really hard-hit segment of the retail portfolio. What's going to happen with these properties?
Yeah, and malls are super complicated because of the ownership structure. There could be multiple owners that own different department stores and then the core of the mall. And there's lots of agreements that kind of dictate the rules and who can, what the allowed reuse is. That aside, I think it comes down to having municipalities that really see what needs to be done now and not waiting till it becomes blighted. Most cities count on the retail sales for sales tax revenue. And so I think, look, it's a partnership on those bigger shopping centers to redevelop them before they become blighted. And I think, look, things will continue to change and evolve. And I'm pretty bullish on all of that. Like, we've got a couple malls here in Phoenix that are going to be redone in the near future, and they're going to be great multifamily. They'll have, probably some self-storage in the back, but they'll have new uses and they're being reimagined.
Is that a complete teardown, or can you make a reasonable reuse out of that property in its existing configuration, or is it just a wrecking ball and then build something new?
A lot of it can be a wrecking ball. A lot of it's reimagined. We're selling about 5 acres right now, part of about 10,000 square foot shopping center we're in the middle of redeveloping that was mostly vacant, and we're selling it to a charter school. And they're actually going to use the footprint of the existing, it's about 30,000 square feet, used to be retail space, and they're going to reimagine the facade and make it a school, and they've got their bus lane and their playground in the back. And so I think it's, hey, how do we, talk about being environmentally friendly? Hey, how do we kind of reimagine, repurpose existing buildings?
Yeah, but schools, Is school going to look the same after this? I don't know. It's just hard to know. But yeah, that is a creative use for sure. Very interesting times we are in. Josh, thank you so much for joining us, and everybody listening, thank you for joining us. And happy investing, and stay well.